This week's G.L.O show, we're talking about property values, we're talking about tax appeals, we're talking about using an appraiser to improve your real estate investing. Welcome to the G.L.O show. When we talk about real estate investing, one of the keys to real estate investing is value. We need to know the value of the properties that we're buying to know if we're getting a good deal or not. Now, one thing I learned in my time as an investor and in the mortgage industry was that you need to have an appraiser that you can rely upon. So today, I'm introducing you to the appraiser that I rely upon, Christopher Alison. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Chris has been with me a really long time, and it's important to build a relationship with your appraiser. The same way we've been talking about building a relationship with your mortgage guy. Now, there's been some huge changes in a mortgage guy's relationship with his appraiser. So from the mortgage perspective, how has that changed?
Well, now lenders want you to go through third-party management companies where they assign appraisers almost based on a lottery system, where there's absolutely no contact between the bank, the lender, and the appraiser. Everything goes through these third-party appraisal management companies, AMCs.
Now, the whole purpose of the AMCs was to reduce values being inflated and fraud. In your opinion, has that done any of that?
Not at all. In fact, if anything, it's just made the process a whole lot more confusing and difficult to get the product to the lender in a timely order without alleviating as much unnecessary steps as possible.
And now you have to split your fees. One thing that I first noticed about that is the appraiser just made less money. The third-party servicer, they were taking a big chunk for doing nothing except assigning these.
Almost just as much as the appraiser makes. I mean, they're charging the lenders more money. You know, they send an order over where they actually let you know what their client's paying, and then when they offer you, you know, a lowball number, it's like, you know, how do you expect to make more than the person actually licensed performing the job, just as an echo, you know?
Wow, wow. And then how do you have quality? I mean, if we're talking about the quality of the appraisals weren't good during the boom, which is what they're saying, right? And so the response to that was to pay you less.
Correct.
What I personally use Chris Alison for is not as connected with the mortgage business, but instead as an investor. The value of your property, or the after-repaired value, is really critical. So I'll send Chris out and I'll say, what's my ARV? What's my after-repaired value? And I rely upon him to go out, do a full appraisal of the property. Then I can back out my construction costs and decide if I'm getting a good deal or not. So Chris, if there's not as much mortgage work out there and real estate investors are becoming a bigger part of your business, what percentage would you say is real estate investors versus traditional mortgage lenders?
I'd have to say at least 95% of my business is private transactions, whether it be tax appeal work, after repair value, short sale investing. Investors want a price to send to the lender for loss mitigation, or hard money lending.
Interesting. You're talking about hard money lending. I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about those tax appeals because that's some interesting stuff. I know we've done some work together. You've represented Patch of Land, which is a crowdfunder in California. How are they to work with?
I wish every job could be for Patch of Land. I mean, they really ask very little but quality work in a timely fashion. I mean, other appraisers should only be so lucky.
So you are still representing some commercial banks, some traditional banks. You're now representing some crowdfunders, and you're representing a lot of people doing tax appeals. We call you up and we say, we've got a client, we want to do a tax appeal. From your perspective as the appraiser, what's the next step?
Well, as a courtesy, we run some numbers and find out what you're actually assessed on. A lot of people really don't know what they're actually assessed on. They get a postcard in the mail that may show what your assessment is, but that's not the actual number the municipality is actually taxing you on year in and year out, as there's other components, as the assessment's only part of a formula in which constituents are being taxed on. But to actually find out what you're being taxed on, because in terms of tax appeal, you speak in terms of market value, is the assessment divided by the equalization rate, which the equalization rate is like a consumer price index. Year to year, as property values fluctuate, go up and down, this equalization rate is applied to every property in town across the board, and you arrive at what the town's mass appraisal techniques are taxing you on.
Right. So what that means is if I get my little index card, right, I get that once a year, and it says my house is assessed at $800,000, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the correct number because of the equalization rate.
That's correct. In fact, if the equalization rate was 50%, you'd actually be taxed as though you're worth $1.6 million.
So Chris, I call you up, I've got a client, we've talked through the whole process. You say to me, this looks like a good one. This looks like a property where we can save the homeowner money. What's the next step?
If you don't have an attorney, or if you do have an attorney, you want to make sure you meet the April 1st deadline date. You have to have your application in by April 1st to file with the county to appeal that tax year. So the first step would be having your application in by April 1st.
Which means you've all missed that date. So it's too late this year. But if you want to contact us next year to get your tax appeal done,
you can start as first as October 1st.
Now, this is interesting. Why do they need to wait till October 1st?
Because October 1st is when the tax season actually ends at a county level.
Which means that if we're doing your appraisal in March, we can only use comps from the previous October or back, correct?
That's correct.
We bring Chris Alison into our tax appeal hearings. If you're going to make an argument in front of the tax appeal judge, what information do you use to support your argument?
Okay, first off, as far as tax court for the state of New Jersey, an appraisal needs to be performed because what you're looking to do is contest mass appraisal techniques. And the only thing that would show as evidence in the state of New Jersey is an appraisal done by a licensed appraiser. So I'd be hired as your expert witness to testify according to value as far as what the sales in the neighborhood have sold and what is the property's value if it's not being assessed properly.
And a lot of this is haggling back and forth with the tax assessor about what comps can be used and what comps can't be used. And without an expert in your corner, they're going to be pointing to a whole bunch of comps that may not even be valid. Or they may be missing a good comp or two that really support your low valuation. One thing that I think it's important to understand is that an appraiser is valuable to all real estate investors, but also valuable to anybody who is concerned about the taxation of their property. I love to take a property, bring in a tax appeal, lower the rates and increase my cash flow. Or in the alternative, if I'm doing a tax appeal in connection with my rehab, that's making that property more valuable to my end purchaser. So I do a lot of tax appeals. My office does a bunch, and I do a lot for my personal investments. And I want to thank Chris Alison for coming out today, teaching us about tax appeals, teaching us about the appraisal process, and being a valuable asset to my team.
Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Do you want to become a better real estate investor? Go to njreclub.com. You'll get invites to all of our events and all of the G.L.O. Show videos.